Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. We are every Friday at noon, and we're super excited about this journey that we're on and all the feedback that we've been getting. This has been wonderful. We're 40-something episodes into this whole thing, and it's amazing the people I've met and the discussions I've had, the things I've learned myself, and the opportunities to talk about things that people don't generally talk about, to have real conversations with people wanting real recovery. And so if you're interested in any modality on how to heal from trauma or addiction, go back and look at some of our previous episodes where we interviewed therapists and teachers and authors, and stay tuned. Today we're going to be talking with a good friend of mine who also had the same religion that he started off in, which was Judaism. I was born Jewish. I was born in New York, and there are different forms of it. We were a little bit watered down. We were, in my opinion, conveniently Jewish, where we had temple and we had bat mitzvahs, and we celebrated certain holidays, but we were not practicing and really focusing on all of the spiritual principles and applying them, and the I guess you'd say the program of it all, the ideas, the methods, the practices. We didn't do that, and I grew up in alcoholism too, and so and my dad, even though Jewish, was more of an atheist, and my mom was also an addict, and she was someone who very, very rarely talked about God. So years later, when I was already in my addiction and a lot of complex PTSD already, tried to kill myself, etc., I found myself tutoring, and I became the best tutor at my temple for Hebrew. It was an out for me. It was something that I did to have something for myself. I grew up, as you guys know from previous episodes, with a lot of drama, and this was something that I felt like gave me a sense of like empowerment and feeling useful and whatever. And I just happened to be good at the language. That was really all that was to it. And so when I was in my 10th grade of high school, I was failing everything. I was on the top 10 people that missed the most school, but I had still been tutoring this Hebrew. And this one of my teachers ended up becoming the head of a program called Morashah at Adelphi University on Long Island, and invited me to become a Hebrew teacher. And I grew up in a lot of violence, and I did not feel safe in my own home, and this was an opportunity to get some sort of like a degree, to be able to have a job, to be able to move out, which I was scared to do. And I also doubled up on my 11th and 12th grade classes at high school, and to graduate early, which was crazy. So I took 3 years of school in the same year, 11th and 12th grade of high school, and my first year of college at Adelphi, studying Hebrew. And I mean, because I don't do anything non-alcoholically, and crashed and burned, and graduated from everything, the youngest person to get a Hebrew teaching degree. Started teaching, but all of my ism was just too much for me, and I just felt like I had one class that I taught, and there were the boys in the back of the room throwing things at each other, and the girls in the front of the room going through my pocketbook asking me about boys, and I was the one that was afraid that the principal was going to go into my classroom and say, what the hell's going on? And I just knew that I looked like an adult, but I was not. I was still very stunted from my alcoholism being in full force, and I needed to not do that. So I put that on the shelf, and I just figured, one day somehow I'm going to be a teacher, just maybe not now, and maybe not Hebrew. But that experience definitely stayed with me. Over time, I felt like, and actually, to tell you the truth, I was in love with a guy. He was 100% Sicilian, and his name was Jim DeBetta. And I believed that he was the one. And I was wrong, but he was the one. And so while I was in school to become a Hebrew teacher, we were learning about what makes a Jew a real Jew, and whether or not I'd be able to be buried in Israel, and etc. You know, did I have piercings or tattoos, and was I dating outside of my religion and stuff like that. And so I felt a breach of my commitment to Judaism because I was in love with somebody who's 100% Sicilian. And I just felt like there has to be for myself a spiritual path that allows for more inclusivity and not so much exclusivity. And I turned my back on a lot of what's really beautiful about that religion, and I didn't shun it, but I didn't embrace it anymore at all. And I just figured I would find my path that was going to be more of a spiritual path that wasn't in alignment with any religion. And I did a lot of research on a lot of religions, and got to a full circle through recovery to forgive all the stupid stories I had about every religion, including Judaism, including Christianity, to get to a place now where I could see my concept of God everywhere. So I asked my friend Michael to be on the show today because I know that he too grew up in that religion and has gone through a lot in his 10 years in recovery. And I'm curious to hear what his perceptions were that changed over time as well as hear about his story, and to like kind of acknowledge that you know, people who come into recovery may end up you know, there are people that come into recovery and have an issue with the God word entirely, and then there are people that come in that are already feeling comfortable in their religion of choice or their upbringing, their religion of their origin. And then there are people who have like big, huge, fat resentments and fear stories about Christianity or any kind of organized religion, and can balk at maybe if they went to a 12-step program, the Lord's Prayer, or maybe feel uncomfortable going into a church since that's where a lot of their 12-step meetings can be, and feel like when they hear the God word that maybe religion is being forced down their throat. And so everybody has to go through their own journey. We've talked about this several times on previous episodes. And so it comes down to each person, no matter what, taking whatever it is their experience and their concept of a higher power is, and allowing it to become more personal and what more resonates with them and works for them, so that it's not a hindrance anymore to their peace of mind and their ability to trust their intuition and to not feel alone, and to be able to like self-actualize, really be able to live the life that they couldn't in their addiction. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us on this show. You know I adore you. And so tell us a little bit about how your life was growing up, and how when alcoholism really like looked like it was taking form for you.
Wow. Okay. So I had a pretty idyllic childhood. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. We had everything we needed and most of what we wanted. I remember I went to a Jewish preschool, Jewish nursery, and then we moved to a suburb of Portland called Beaverton. And for first grade, the first week of first grade, my mother allowed me to go to public school. I had asked her to. We had just moved. And I got on the school bus. I was so excited. And I went off to this public school, and I came home that afternoon, and I told my mother all about my day. And the next day I was enrolled in a Jewish day school.
Oh, wow.
My mother likes to call herself the Great Reform. That is her title. But she's actually closer to God than almost anyone I know.
Beautiful.
It was not, for us, it was, for my mother in particular, it was never about the ritual. It was always about her relationship with God. And she was very quiet about it. Very quiet about it. I learned more about humility from my mother growing up than anybody I've ever met. She was the kind of woman. So I went to this day school for 8 years. That was the grade. The day school went from first grade through 8th grade.
Okay.
And for all 8 grades of me and my 2 younger brothers, we were using the Sunday school classrooms in a synagogue. And my mother, as president of the school board,
Of course.
right, ended up raising the money to build a building. Okay,
Oh, wow.
It's now a different thing. You will not find her name anywhere on that building. You will not find her name mentioned because nobody remembers. Because that was, my mother's still alive, so I'm not going to speak about her in the past tense. But that's who my mother is.
Yeah.
My mother is about the work, and she's always been about the work and never about herself. Never about herself. And I watched that growing up. My father also was very involved in community. He was very involved in Jewish evangelical dialogue in Portland, so the concept of talking to Christians was not unusual to me. Because my parents were on their own spiritual journey over the course of my life. I remember Jewish ritual, obviously, growing up. When I was 12, we moved again, started keeping kosher. It was one of those, it was my parents who were on their journey. It had nothing to do with me. And moving was just kind of a convenient moment for that. So we started keeping kosher at home. And we'd have Friday night dinner, which was a ritual. And then my mother would go to the Blazer game.
Get to the what?
The Trailblazer game.
Okay. I don't even know what that is.
NBA basketball, darling.
Oh, okay.
Portland only had one professional sports team at that time.
Oh, okay.
I think they may still. Yeah, it's an NBA town.
Okay.
So, but that was our ritual, meaning we would have Friday night dinner, make kiddush and hamotzi and challah and the whole thing, strictly kosher, and then my mother would get in the car and go to the basketball game.
Oh, how interesting.
And then, so my alcoholism, I didn't know what an alcoholic was literally until I got sober at 46. I didn't know what alcoholism was. I barely knew.
Did your family drink?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell my father he should drink more. No, and that's the thing. Have I gotten drunk with my father? Yes, I have. But
you've always been to me quite like a boisterous, kind of like I'm here person.
Yeah.
So you are depicting your parents as being quiet and like.
That's interesting.
How did that happen?
So that's all my father's fault, actually. So when I was 8, my father took me to the theater for the first time. Actually, I think the first time, I think I was 6.
Okay.
I think I was 6. He took me to a Portland Civic Theater production of Auntie Mame.
Okay.
You familiar with the show?
Yeah.
So it's this woman, Auntie Mame, and this little boy.
Okay.
And my friend, it was a friend of mine, played the little boy.
Okay.
He was a few years older than I was.
Okay.
And I remember going, oh my God, that's my life, right? That was at 6. I enrolled immediately at Portland Civic Theater. I was in classes constantly. It was my life.
Yeah.
My world revolved around PCT for many, many years as a child. And at 8, he took me to a production of Chicago, traveling production. This was when everyone was still alive.
Yeah.
And sat me in the front row. A chorus line came through. I think I was under 8 at that time. And there were nuns sitting behind us. This is a story that I'm told. This is not a story I remember.
Oh, okay.
Because at one point the show talks about gonorrhea.
Okay.
And I turned to my mother and went, "What's gonorrhea?" And the nuns behind us were like mortified. But yeah, so that was very much my life growing up, was the theater.
Interesting.
We're talking about from ages 6 to 13, 14. Actually, even through high school, I was, now that I think about it, heavily involved in theater. I tell my story today. It's not a story that I remembered when I first got sober. It's something that, looking back,
Isn't
I
that
remember.
interesting how that happens?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, my story has changed so many times because as I start to realize things, even forgive things, I see them from a whole different angle.
Yeah.
And so if you're telling the same story you told when you first got into recovery, you're not in recovery.
Right. So I remembered, and it's definitely a true story. Like I said, I just didn't remember it. I was 12. I was 12 and I came home one day. Mm-hmm. When I was 12, 13 and on, my father owned his own business, and my mother worked for him.
Okay.
And it's funny again, as the business grew, and the business grew quite large, my mother never had a title, but everything crossed her desk. Mm-hmm. Like, that was my mother. So they were both at work this afternoon that I had come home. It was a carpool, so I was dropped off at home. And I had had a bad day, right? And how bad could it have been, right? I'm describing my childhood.
Right.
I'm at summer camp. I'm in private school,
Right.
And my brain told me that the solution for that bad day was to have a drink of beverage alcohol.
Interesting.
And again, there wasn't much to drink in my house. There was Manischewitz.
Yeah.
I remember, in the fridge, blackberry.
Yeah.
Awful.
Ugh.
I poured a big glass.
Interesting.
Poured a big glass, not a wine glass. Got a big drinking glass.
Did you see somebody else drinking?
No.
Never?
I mean, again, like I said, my father drank.
But you never saw somebody drink to change the way they felt?
No.
Not even on a movie?
Well, again, now, what happened when I was 12?
Right.
A little movie came out called All That Jazz.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and my father took me to see it. And that became the mantra for my life. Now, I hope you've seen it, and I hope I'm not ruining this for anyone. No. He dies at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Zip!
Right.
That's the final scene.
Right.
The body bag being zipped up.
Right.
I didn't care.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't care. Bob Fosse became my God. That's who I wanted to be. That's how I wanted to live.
Warning
the
of the
smoking
end of it.
And the Dexedrine and the Showtime folks and the sleeping around. I'm 12.
Right.
And I'm memorizing lines from All That Jazz. I can recite them to you. Ben Vereen was a god to me. Right? What's interesting is I just rewatched it. In the past year, I rewatched All That Jazz.
It's not the same thing.
Well, no, it's exactly the same.
It?
Oh, it's except for one line. The premise of the movie, of course, is that he's filming this movie that he did make, that Fosse actually made about a stand-up comic. And at one point, he's in the hospital. He's in the hospital!
Right.
And he's dying!
Right.
And the comedian's in there with him. And he's saying to the Bob Fosse character, "I've got your number. I know all about you." He said, "You're afraid. You're afraid of being ordinary." Lisa, it was the one line in the entire movie
that
I don't remember. I never heard. And I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it on inventory now. It has changed. That fear
I've heard you say this many times.
Many times.
Yes.
It has driven, since I was 6, a fear of being ordinary has driven my life, my life's choices. And that started very early. Even before that, certainly before the drinking.
That's really fascinating because because it's true that in recovery we learn to be a man among men, and we learn to be equal. Like where they say that the alcoholic is a megalomaniac, with inferiority complexes.
100%.
And like we're either better than or less than. We're either above or we're below.
Absolutely.
And and the idea of being, ordinary, the idea of the idea of not being special.
Yes.
You know, and what does that really mean? I mean, I've definitely had that in spades in my life, this idea like that my security comes from being more than enough.
Yes.
Because if I'm more than enough, then nobody can hurt me. Nobody can say anything bad. You know, nobody could take anything. Because even if they took a little bit, I'd still have more than enough.
Yes. And so for me today, the only thing, right? Because what are we supposed to say? The only thing that I'm special to is God. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah,
I'm
but it's
special,
a different
you're special. No, 100%.
Nobody's more special than anybody else.
No, that's, yes.
It's a whole different definition for special.
It's a whole different...
It's taken a lot to get my head wrapped around a whole different definition for special.
It's taken me 10 years.
How can I be special if everybody else is special too?
Yes.
Explain this to me.
But they are.
Right.
And that's where, you know, this...
They're precious.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And what's beautiful is that I get to treat God's kids that way, mm-hmm. even though it's not up to me. Meaning, but and this was a change that happened to me 7 years sober. Mm-hmm. This is not something that happened. Oh, please.
Yeah, no, I've been at this for a while, and it's amazing the shit that's coming up, and even now to heal, even about relationships. But you know what else I got was that everybody has a special role to play in this globe, in the collective awakening.
Yes.
Like everybody has a different role to play. Everybody has a special path that their awakening is going to look like, and nobody's better than or less than, and everybody's needed.
Yes.
You know, for the awakening.
In and out of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Meaning it's the only
in the world.
The only thing that keeps me sane in regards to my children is the fact that I believe that they have a path.
Yeah.
I have
and it
grandchildren.
Doesn't have to be yours.
And it must not be mine.
Yeah.
I've made that mistake.
Yeah.
In recovery.
That has to look like yours.
I have grandchildren that I will probably never meet unless they decide as adults before I'm dead, which is going to be theirs. That no longer causes me pain. Mm. Because I have this trust, I have this loving God, and those children were gifts to me. Whether I meet them or not is immaterial. Mm-hmm. It's irrelevant, mm-hmm. because it's a part of this bigger picture. That's why I almost did it. That's why not playing God is so important.
Right.
When I first was in treatment, mm-hmm. someone pointed out to me that I was playing God. And I was shocked. I was shocked because, like you said, I was a religious man.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know you thought you were religious. In all your
No,
theater?
I was, well, no, that kid, remember, my ultra-Orthodoxy.
Did you take it as a compliment at first? Like, wow, am I doing it that well? Am I playing God that well? Geez, maybe I'm more of an actor than I thought.
I really thought I was doing it well. So I was not a religious person when I was in the theater. I was not a religious person when I moved to New York. I mean, I moved to New York to go to college.
Okay.
Which was a miracle because I did not take high school very seriously.
Yeah.
I was very busy drinking in high school. And again, what's interesting about this crowd that I ran with in high school is that 6 of the 8 of us, I'm just talking about our core group, 6 of us were hard drinkers. Mm. And we're not alcoholics. It looked that way then. That's one of the things I think is interesting.
I always feel like that conversation gets very, gray to me because, what makes somebody a hard drinker and not an alcoholic? And we don't need to, divert into that.
Okay.
But I've really felt over the years that, if you live your life and you feel like you absolutely, need to incorporate that much alcohol, there is, on some level, a dependency on alcohol. It may not have created any kind of big, huge, brouhahas and negative consequences yet, but there's no way that somebody who's a hard drinker has optimal health, and there's no way that if they're a hard drinker, has a true awareness of who they really are, and has really the skills, and they may not be necessarily needing to call themselves an alcoholic per se, bottom and do some things to make big changes, but through time, as I've gotten healthier and healthier, so I'll just say this one thing. I had this experience once where I had somebody who wanted me to mentor her in recovery, and she had just come off of a different mentor, and this mentor went back to drinking. And so this person said, how do I know whether or not I should stop drinking? Or maybe it's not that big of a deal, because it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal for this person who went back to drinking. I hope you're sticking with me. And, so now I'm mentoring her, right? And so now it's contagious, this kind of thought. So now I'm walking my dog, and I'm talking to God, and I'm talking to myself, and I'm talking to my dog, and I'm thinking, maybe I am healed. Maybe there is a time when I will be able to drink, that reservation came back in my mind and said, well, maybe one day, I'll be able to drink like a normal person. Not that I ever did that before, and be like a normal person. And this awareness came to me, my intuition. I felt like God tell me, why would you want to? Wouldn't you rather live a life where you don't need to? Like, what is it that alcohol would give to you that you can't have otherwise? Why would you want to go back to drinking? And it kind of made me rethink, not just people who are alcoholic, self-identified, because nobody can really, although we try to sometimes, call anybody else an alcoholic. It's a self-diagnosed thing. But I started to realize that, if we're self-medicating, or we're living a life that has that much alcohol or other things interwoven in it, it's not devoid of alcoholism to me. It still has an element of using something to change the way somebody feels, and it's something that the mind is totally accepted, the body's adapted to, and has just become normal, and so I think that when a person gets to a point where they say to themselves that, and this is just my opinion, take what you like and leave the rest, but when a person gets to a place where they're like, they bottom, like their life becomes intolerable to them, and they know that they need to get sober, and they say, okay, I'm an alcoholic, okay, I'm an addict, it's basically, it's an acknowledgement that maybe it was too much then. But oftentimes, when we look at our past through inventory and discussion, we find that there were points in our past where we were already gripped by it, and we would not have considered ourselves an alcoholic. And so, I don't know. No judgment. I'm not going to go around. I'm not some teetotaler going around telling everybody not to drink because it's not the way to do it or whatever like that. But I just definitely, for my own self, it doesn't resonate that there's big, huge, maybe problem drinkers and binge drinkers and, people who party heavy, and then there's the alcoholic and the addict. I don't see, other than a personal bottom, any real difference in the method of using something to change the way we feel when we really get honest with ourselves, and we have a healed relationship with ourselves and others and God, or whatever our concept is. We don't need to check out or self-medicate, and so it makes me look back and say that. So I wasn't going to go off on this tangent, but I did go off on the tangent. But I don't feel like it's a tangent. I feel like it's a really good little subtopic. But I'm
talking about 6 people who stopped drinking.
Yeah. Okay. 6 people who stopped drinking.
I'm talking about people who are not powerless over alcohol.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, but that's my definition.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
I couldn't stop drinking.
Yeah.
And I don't understand people who can.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
No, because, again, I differentiate between dependency and alcoholism.
Yeah.
Dependency, again, I don't know if you want to go off on the tangent or not, but...
Wherever we're supposed to be. Whatever is supposed to be said.
To me, I understand the word dependency, right? Dependency. If I shoot up enough, right, I'm going to become dependent on a drug. To me, there's a differentiation between that, because if I stop, I can get over my dependency. I think what you're touching on, and I very much believe this, is that when we talk about spiritual malady, we're talking about a human condition. The world is suffering right now from spiritual malady. Okay, I think we both agree to that, right? I mean, look, I read the newspaper every day. Yes,
in a
I'm
myriad
that old.
of ways. Yeah, absolutely.
But the shootings that are happening right now, and we can talk about gun control all you like, pro and con. This is a manifestation of spiritual malady. That's my opinion.
Absolutely.
And the problem is, I was about to die, and I would be dead if I wasn't willing to surrender to my powerlessness.
And so this was at 46 years old?
At 46 years old.
So what was your life at the time when all this was going on? Actually, hold that thought. We need to take a break. So when we come back, we'll find out how his life was when he got sober. Please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a couple minutes. The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal. Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Please remember you can watch us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app, and you can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Before the break, we were talking to Michael, and he was about to tell us about what happened, what his bottom looked like when he was 46 years old, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell us.
Yes, ma'am. So I've always been a seeker. That didn't happen in recovery. And as a young man, I was seeking. And I had a girlfriend who was also very much seeking. And in New York, during university, we became religious Jews.
Okay.
Modern Orthodox is the label. And so by the time we graduated from university, she really wanted out of New York. New York had never been her city. She came with a purpose, and when that purpose was accomplished, she was ready to get out. So we looked at various religious communities. We looked at Atlanta. We looked at Vancouver, British Columbia. Had beautiful Orthodox communities. But I was brought up in a home where Israel was the destination. And my parents subsequently moved as well, although we beat them there. Their plans predate ours. But we moved to Israel.
Okay.
2 weeks after the wedding, we got married, and we went to Israel on one-way flights with 4 suitcases, and she had never been there. And we started on this it was a spiritual,
I love Israel.
religious journey.
I love the bread in Israel. The bread in the little cobblestone at the time. This was many years ago. I don't even know if that's even the thing now.
Oh, it's,
But
well, yeah,
I got to
it's
swim in
just
the
older
Dead
now.
Sea and all that stuff. Nobody really swims in the Dead Sea. I got to float.
You got to float on the Dead Sea. And we went from being modern Orthodox. Our journey took us to Hasidus. And what happened for me was we got to this place in modern Orthodoxy where I said, okay, we're following all the laws, all the commandments, Sabbath and dietary and family, purity and all this stuff. Is that all there is? I mean, is it just this ritual that we're doing? And that led me to Hasidus, which is a much more spiritual, it's supposed to be, a much more spiritually based way of practicing Judaism. I was also committed to allowing, what I thought at the time was allowing my children to find the way, find the way to God. I mean, that was our purpose. And for me, and I did not know this, right? But for me, as an alcoholic, I just kept finding the ritual empty. I realize in recovery now, I had this prayer life, right? 3 times a day, religiously.
It could be very rote. Yeah, it could be very automatic. We're doing the prayers, but we're not really experiencing it.
Well, and now even, you wanted to talk about some of the things I look back on, right?
Yeah.
I've tried, I was 3 years sober before I left religious practice. So I have been, as religious as I was when I was drinking, I have been sober as well. Today I look back at some of the prayers and I can't get over the fact that it really, to me, and maybe not to my children or the community, just a series of demands. It's not really prayer. Now, again, that could be me. But even looking at them now, I struggle today with a lot of what is Jewish literature today. And I remember a few weeks before I hit bottom, and we'll talk about that, I was on the phone with my closest friend at the time. We had basically gone down this path together. And I'm on the phone with him, and I'm screaming at him, and I'm swearing, and I'm dropping F-bombs, which today, as you know, isn't unusual for me. But back then, no one spoke like that. And I'm screaming at him, I can't get any more effing religious. There's nowhere to go. Meaning I was as religious as a person could be in this world. And I'm going crazy. And I'm going crazy. And, I had a lot of very big rabbis in my life. I mean, bishop, pope type figures. And they couldn't save me. They couldn't save me because they didn't know what I was suffering from. And all the love that they had for me, all the prayers and blessings that they wanted to heap on me wasn't enough. Wasn't enough. In September of 2012, my oldest son had just gotten married that spring. My oldest daughter had just gotten engaged that summer. We're in the middle of the high holidays. My wife and I are in marriage counseling, which is hysterical when I think about it now. My marriage counseling was basically me presenting my case against the world to a counselor. When I think about it now, it's stunning. When I know about what we do with inventory, I had a case.
No personal responsibility.
None. None. It was the Rebbe. It was his son. It was my friend. It was my wife. It was
How am I supposed to deal with these people?
Oh, they were awful to me. Awful to me. Treating me terribly. I spoke fluent Victimese. And I showed up at a counseling session one afternoon to discover she was not coming. And she had no intention of coming. And I discovered from the therapist that my best friend at that time had been in on the whole, like, and I flipped out. I flipped out. I lost it. Can you imagine a guy looking like I'm selling diamonds on 47th Street?
Yeah.
Right? On a public bus in Jerusalem, screaming at his wife in the phone, telling her that her effing life was over, her pretty little life. It's gone. It's done. I'm finished. So I got home to discover my father had beaten me to my own house and informed me that I was to leave. Told me that I had to leave. And my ex, she had called him. She had called my own father and said, you have to come.
And your own father did that?
Yeah, threw me out of my own house.
Of your own house.
And I would like to say that I went quietly.
Did nobody believe you?
You would not believe me. I went cursing and screaming my own father in front of my own children, 7 of them. And it was ugly. It was ugly. And I went to a friend's. It was literally Erev Sukkot. I mean, it was literally the eve of a holiday. And I went to a friend, and I basically hunkered down there. He was a friend who also had what I needed.
Oh, okay.
Also a religious man. Also a family man. But he had plenty of what I needed. And I hunkered down there, and I knew the gig was up. And so during that holiday, that's a week-long holiday, I found a medical detox. This was the doctor, actually, who had pioneered...
Are you still living in Israel at the time?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
This is in Israel.
Okay.
This is in Jerusalem. And there's a doctor in a city called Ashdod who pioneered the medical cleansing, physically, of heroin and oxy addicts.
Interesting.
And he had pioneered it. It's done here now in the States as well.
Oh, interesting.
I'm told it looks like an exorcism. I did not watch. It was him, an anesthesiologist, full anesthesiology, and an ER nurse. That's who was in the room with me. And I don't remember. I mean, I was out.
Yeah.
And I remember waking up around 3 a.m. Just the nurse was there, and I wanted a popsicle. It's all I wanted was a popsicle. I was dehydrated, and I spent the next 2 weeks. My wife was already not speaking to me. She was done. She had not come to the hospital, not anything. I went to my parents, because that's where all, good 46-year-old drunks end up, is at their parents' house. And
were you welcome now? Did it because you had gone to detox?
My parents. Well, remember, my father threw me out
of your house,
of my house, because of what
was going on with your wife.
What was going on with the family? But no, they were the ones who were there for me. They took me to the hospital.
Okay.
They were there for me. They were there for me. I went to their house. This is a really interesting part of the story, actually, because I stayed with them for a couple of weeks. And the doctor didn't know anything about alcoholism, or he wasn't willing to talk about it, which is fine. He was a surgeon.
Okay.
He was a man of science. He told me, you're good. You're good. You're good to go. You're all cleaned out, and I've put a blocker in your system, right, which you're going to take orally. It was not Suboxone. It was some sort of a blocker.
Okay.
Right, so I wouldn't have cravings.
Did it work?
It did.
Okay.
It did. Also, I was wiped.
Yeah, you were done.
I was wiped.
Yeah.
I was done. But this is what's interesting. So 2 weeks into this, I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to eat again. I'm starting to, and I told my mother 2 weeks into this. So this is the October 10th is the date. So this is towards the 25th of October or so. I said to my mother, call my wife and tell her it's time for me to come home. And
Yeah.
she believed her. She believed me. It was the last time she ever believed me. And I remember it was a Friday. I went home. It was a beautiful afternoon. And we had a beautiful Sabbath. Beautiful. I was back at the table. I was involved. I was with the children, reading and singing. And my wife and I took a walk that Saturday night, and we talked about how wonderful life was going to be now.
Oh.
Right? now that I was clean. And that's not language from another fellowship. That's what the doctor told me. You're clean now. You're good to go. And we took this walk Saturday night and talked about how wonderful that was going to be. Saturday night, I couldn't sleep. Saturday night, I was up all night on my iPad watching her sleep. Now, I don't know if she was sleeping. The truth is. She looked like she was sleeping. And all the resentment. And all, right? Because I'm now 2 weeks without a drink.
Without anything to deal with the thinking.
Right? And I had that morning what the psychiatrist later that week called a psychotic breakdown.
Yeah.
Right? What I understand today, for me, is that I was not spiritually or emotionally prepared to be sober. You had taken away my solution.
There has to be a mental solution.
There has to be a spiritual spiritual solution.
There has to be tools immediately.
And I didn't have. And
Right.
I left the house that second time on my own, screaming and yelling. Right? Screaming and yelling like a madman. Like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And that was the end.
Yeah.
That was the end.
So you then you got sober in Israel.
I did. I ended up in a rehab in November by the grace of a loving God. I was not going to go. Remember, this is 2012. Guess who's singing
Right.
about rehab?
Right.
Right? She should rest in peace.
Yeah.
I'm listening to that song
Yeah.
and going, that's right. A friend of mine said to me, I'd like to take you and check out this rehab. I said, I'm not going to rehab.
Yeah.
What are you trying? I'm busy.
Yeah.
Right? With nothing.
So were you still working? Did you still have your business?
No. In May of 2012, I had shut down my business. This was in May of 2012.
Why did you shut it down?
Because I was done.
With everything?
Yeah.
Your whole life?
I went to bed, yes.
Okay.
I literally went to bed. My eldest daughter got engaged that summer, and I almost didn't make it to her engagement party. People had to, my mother came. I think it was my mother who actually convinced me at the end. My best friend came. My wife, interestingly, did not come and tried to talk me into coming to this party.
Right.
You were talking about either being better than or lower than. This is classic. I'm in bed because I don't want to see anybody. I am done. I'm the worst worm in the world. I don't want to be seen. The world had become a dangerous place, a hostile place. But my friend came and I think my mother actually finally came and said, you will get out of that bed and come to this party. And I remember walking into the party and being led, of course, to a seat of honor, all dressed in my Sabbath, costume, and sitting down. And my first thought was that I was gracing everyone with my presence.
Oh my gosh. The party can start now. I have arrived.
And I am gracing you with my presence.
So you ended up going to rehab,
yes.
But you had already come off of the alcohol and the drugs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So now you went into rehab dry.
Yeah.
Needing more
absolutely.
tools and solution. That's
wonderful. There's no other way.
Perfect.
There's no other way.
I think it's a really good message because I too was dry before I got into any kind of official recovery of any kind. I was dry because I grew up with a mom who had done some things in recovery that I felt like didn't work for her, and so I felt like it didn't work for anyone then, and I wasn't going to do it.
Right.
So I had to get so in my own sobriety. I had to get so uncomfortable that I had to do something.
Yes.
And it was coming out sideways in food anyway, so I went. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my life was just over. For me, it was just I was done. I was 46 and I was done. I was dead. I was a dead man walking. And this friend of mine said, I'd like to check out this rehab. And I said, I'm not going to rehab. And he said, well, and it was a religious rehab.
Okay.
A religious rehab. And he said, I think they have an outpatient program. Let's just go check it out. Now, he was lying to me. There was
Really? That's so funny.
Well, there was an outpatient program.
But that wasn't what he was coming to show
in a
you.
completely different location. I never actually saw the outpatient program.
Yeah.
It was in a completely different location. We went the first time, and something happened to me there.
Yeah.
Something happened to me there. The second time that I went to visit was with my mother. And I said to her, "Ma, I don't know what they do here." I mean, I really didn't. I had no idea.
But you had a feeling.
I said, "I feel better being here."
Yeah.
And she said, "Then I think you better stay."
That's beautiful.
And that's literally what happened. And it took a couple weeks for them to find me a bed.
Mm-hmm.
I was very blessed. It's a 7-month program. I was there for 8 months.
That's wonderful.
Slow learner.
Yeah. Overachiever.
And overachiever. And it was an amazing experience.
That's funny. Overachiever, slow learner. It's like two sides of the same special coin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was the physical manifestation of the first step.
That's beautiful.
It was the physical manifestation of powerlessness. Mm-hmm. And I needed that because I didn't know what the word meant. Mm-hmm. I had never, what? Powerless?
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no proof in my life, other than my drinking, that I was powerless over anything.
Yeah.
And that's why this, being pointed out that I was playing God.
For me, I had to redefine every kind of word that was all of our keywords in recovery. I've had to redefine it too because of that whole idea of what does it really mean to be powerless, and what does our will in our life really mean, our thinking and our behavior and our experience, like really getting to a place of like, what am I really doing when I'm looking at myself? Am I looking at myself looking for guilt and how I'm a horrible person, or am I looking for like a chance to see cause and condition, information that's setting in motion a chain reaction that I'm constantly reliving over and over again in my life? I think we all in recovery have to, if we balk at something about recovery that we think no, maybe our definition will prohibit us from actually having, that experience, like, contempt prior to investigation.
Absolutely.
Which I heard somewhere. But yeah.
I don't know where.
Yeah. So when did you come back to the States?
Oh, so I didn't come back. The first time I traveled back to the States was in 2015.
Okay.
I was just coming up on 3 years.
Okay.
Basically, the divorce went final. It took us 3 years to go through 3 divorces.
Why did you come back to the United States?
Oh, I mean, I'm a traveler. Okay. I'm both a seeker and a traveler, and I travel.
But did you miss it here, or did you just
absolutely.
It's one thing to travel; it's another thing to move.
No, so the first time. No, that's what I'm saying. No, the first time was just. I called it my victory tour.
Okay. Oh my God! So much humility.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I have this little defect. Yes, I have this little defect called grandiosity, and it will not be lifted because I'm not willing to give it up.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I came. I started out in Atlanta at a very large convention.
Okay.
And it was life changing.
Yeah.
Life changing.
The energy of all that.
Life changing.
It's amazing.
It was and then I traveled the country going to events, and I visited a lot of different cities, and then went back to Israel. I mean, my intention really was to stay in Israel. I had a son living with me, who's now a daughter. It's a whole nother story.
Okay.
But he and I were living together at the time in Jerusalem. And my plan was to pick up. It was that summer that I left ritual behind. It was that summer.
To go deeper and to focus more on the experience?
No, I just left ritual Judaism behind.
Yeah.
I mean, I just stopped, keeping kosher and dressing like a...
Yeah, well, you walked away from everything. Something had to change, right? You walked away from your job, your business.
Well, that was when I was still... That was before I got into recovery.
Yeah.
No, I think that for the first 3 years in my sobriety, I believed that there was the possibility that what God wanted me to do was to go back into that community and to bring recovery into that community. And it was that spring going into that summer that I realized that was not where God wanted me.
That
was not where
interesting?
God wanted me.
Yeah.
So that was that summer.
I love how you talk about this because the truth is it is the rituals and the dogma and the stories and the you have to's and the you shoulds and the stuff like that. That was more of my turn off. And, made me have to like kind of detach from all of that, because I had already so much other rituals and stories and shame and whatever, just from growing up the way that I did. But I have found, though, that rituals in and of themselves can be dangerous, because we can get where it's almost like something we do that's supposed to magically fix a thing, rather than have a personal like experience of coming from an intuition. And I remember when I was driving my car once, and the Serenity Prayer lost all of its power. I had been using that thing like a magical incantation, and I was the supreme witch. Every time I had anything other than peace, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and then and it was just like the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. And I would have a pink cloud, and all would be utopia. And then it stopped working. It stopped working because I was, did you ever read a book and you're reading the lines and you just read a whole page and you were not present for what you just read?
This morning.
Yeah. Okay, good. So it's fresh in your mind. So I felt like I was doing that with ritual.
Yes.
With prayer, and with reading the same thing, and it was no longer a fresh experience. It was no longer fresh eyes, fresh ears, and a fresh heart. And I was no longer teachable and open. There was no humility. It was just me back in the driver's seat saying my magical incantation that was supposed to make everything okay. But what made it okay before was that I believed in it, and I applied it, and I experienced it, and I wasn't that day. And I remember when I was like, oh my God, like, oh shit, what now? If this isn't working, and I thought that was recovery.
Right, we do it in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
We ritualize recovery.
Rituals are great for an undisciplined mind, to teach us things and to help us to do things that are really for our highest good. But when they become little demigods in their own right, and we are doing them just because we should, there's this cognitive disconnect where we are not actually in recovery in that moment.
Correct. And I watch it in events.
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
People sitting there
yeah.
with headphones in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thinking that by sitting there in that room,
they're going to get it through osmosis.
Right.
Yes.
And I always...
they are spiritual seats, so...
Well, and they are, and God is certainly there.
Yeah.
But I always... This is my favorite analogy about it. I never got drunk sitting in a bar watching other people drink.
I love that.
Right? And it's the same in recovery.
So I'm not going to get recovery by watching people recover. It has to be a personal experience. I love that. So we're nearing the end of our hour. And so is there anything else that really kind of stands out for you about, how your spiritual journey is now, and, letting go of like the need to be special, and what that is for you?
Yes. I had to inventory everything that I was and that I had been a part of, particularly when it came to my children that are still religious. Because I had tremendous resentment against them, their community, and I still inventory that. Most of that resentment has been lifted. But it happens. My defects of character revisit me with alarming regularity.
Yeah.
So I still have to inventory it. But for the most part, I'm at peace with how I practice my relationship with God. And more importantly, for my own peace, I'm comfortable with how you practice. Which
is beautiful, which I feel is ultimately true spirituality, is allowing for all religions to be right.
Yes.
All walks, all whatever. Even like if somebody says that they're atheists, I look to how they're listening to their gut.
Yes.
And that they want to live a healthy, loving, tolerant way.
Yes.
And so I feel like there's a path for everyone. And I feel like when we think we need to be right and we have the way, that's when we're playing God.
100%. Spirituality doesn't even require a deity.
Right. It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it requires us to tap into our spirit.
And a power greater than myself.
Yes.
Which was a much bigger ask for me.
Yeah.
Believing in God, a creator of the world, no problem.
Yeah.
A power greater than me?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Thank you so much. This has been beautiful. I knew it would be, and I knew that we can talk about everything for hours and hours about what is this and what is that. As I love when you share. I love your focus. I love your humility. Even I love when you tell on yourself about being non-humble. You know, like oh, so let me tell you, this is where I have wanted to run the show again. You know, and
today
tell on yourself and allow yourself to be part of the process, because as I've mentioned before, I feel like people who want to, and I'm a very, very strong advocate of being solution oriented, very strong advocate of that. But people who want to pretend they're someplace that they're not, and not actually share, hey, I'm a work in progress, I'm blooming where I'm planted. It doesn't allow for anyone to like connect on common issues.
Yes.
You know, and realize that we're all having this, we're spirits having this human experience, but we are having this human experience.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.